Hey, my name is Chris, and welcome to Coding in Public. Today we are working on the CSS for this note taker application that we started last time. Last time we just worked on the HTML, and next time we're going to work on the JavaScript. Now, if you only are interested in JavaScript, I will add a link in the description and a card so you can jump right to that once the JavaScript portion is live. But for now, let's go ahead and look at the note taker application, just setting up all this CSS. Now, last time we talked about different options, like if you click submit early, this little message pops up here. You can pop up a little modal and read the text here. We've got it truncated to just 4 lines when you're not using it or can't see the whole thing. So these are some of the things we're going to set up right now with CSS. And again, next time we'll look at the JavaScript. Let's jump in. Okay, so we've got this ugly HTML going up right now. You can see we've got a few things. We've got this modal container, which will be for that pop-up area. We've got the form container, which is holding all this current stuff right here. And then finally the note container, which basically is going to hold all those cards once they are populated. So let's go ahead and start working on the CSS. Now, I've got this set up with Parcel, which I did last time. And the reason I'm writing in SCSS is just to make it a little quicker. I'm not going to be using that much that you couldn't just use in CSS. So if you're more comfortable with CSS, hopefully you can translate some of this over that way. All right, first thing we need to do is we're going to set up a basic clear. Now, I've got a clear here that I use that just basically is going to cut out borders, margin, padding, and set everything to box sizing. All right, next we need to grab our font. Now, I used, I think, Poppins from Google Fonts, so let's go ahead and grab that. Come over here and grab Poppins, and I think I used like 400 and 700, something like that. I'm not sure I even ever used the 700, but let's go ahead and grab that. Let's get a little more space here. Okay, I selected all of those. Now I can just come in here, and I'm going to just grab this little import script and add it directly to my CSS, and then I'll need this font family here. All right, let's come back over this way, and the next thing I'm going to do is add to my body here that font family. Now, if I save it here, you should notice everything kind of hot reloads, and eventually this should populate. Yeah, there you go, and you can see that font coming in. Now, we do have several colors we're going to bring in, and I'm going to add those just as normal variables. Let's see, let's do that right here. So I'll say these are going to be my colors. And then assuming you don't want to watch me type in all these colors, I'll just copy them in here for you. All right, so there are our colors we're going to work with. Now let's jump back down to our body. The easiest way to put everything in the middle of the page is just to do a display grid and then to say place items center. We're going to do a padding around everything of like 2 rem and make sure the text color of everything is dark. Now let's get a little bit more space in this document. All right, now the first thing let's work on, since it's so visible, will be that form container. So we'll say form container, that's where most of the stuff on the page currently resides. And we're going to say we don't want it to be larger than like 1,000 pixels. All right, and then we'll do margin up top of 1 rem and side to side of auto, so it'll stay there in the middle. Now inside here, and we're just going to nest this because we're using SCSS, and that should help us a little bit. So we'll say for the H1 inside here, we want the font size to be 3 rem, and we're going to text align to the center. And for the H2, we want the color to be our success variable. And again, this is SCSS. You could just type the hex code or add it as a CSS variable if you'd prefer. And then text align of center. I realized that I said H3 and typed H2. So this is our problem. There we go. Now everything's jumping right like it should. When we come in here and hit submit, there is this possibility of adding a message here. We're going to actually add that with JavaScript, but we're going to give it a class called message. So it'll just say message. And let's go ahead and kind of stylize that. And maybe what we can do is just so that we can see what it'll look like. It'll be in here, and I think it will just be a div with the class of message. We'll say like, hi, I'm a message. Okay. Come back this way. And this message itself, we're going to say needs a margin up top of 1 rem, and then side to side 0, and then at the bottom we'll do 1.5 rem, give us a little bit more space down below. All right, the color of the text, we're going to do white, and then the padding will be 1 rem, and again we are going to text align center. Now inside here, we are going to have a couple different options. If we add the thing and it works, so like note I'm adding, all right, and something else here. If we add it, we'll get this green color, and if we try to add it early, we'll get this red color, and if we delete a note, we'll get a blue color. All right, so we've got 3 different variations of this message that may pop up. The first one we'll call success message, and this one we'll do background color of, you guessed it, success. We're going to add a box shadow to it. We'll do 2 pixels to move it to the right and 4 pixels to move it down that amount, 7 pixels for the blur and 2 pixels for the spread. And then we'll say we want RGBA success, and then we're going to add an alpha to it. Now, again, we're using SCSS, so we can do this a little quicker. That's why I've got it working this way. Now we're going to copy this down 2 more times. We're going to change this success here and there to say primary. And then we'll change this up here to say remove, because this is what we're going to use for that remove message. I guess let's do the same thing here. We'll do alert. This is the red message. And here we'll change this to danger. Okay, so we've got the message ready to go, and we need to probably add a class. So let's add a class like this to it so we can actually see what's happening here. Because not only do we need the message, we also need the color. There you go. Hi, I'm a message. All right, so we've got that set up. So let's go ahead and remove this from the HTML and jump back over this way. Okay, so now let's work on the actual form itself. So the first thing is we're going to add a display grid, and then we're going to add a grid gap of 1 rem, margin up top of 1 rem, side to side will be 0, and we'll make sure the width is set to 100% of its parent container. Inside here, we're going to grab the labels, all the inputs in the text area, which there's only, I think, 1 text area and 1 input, but there are 2 labels. And we'll say that the font family to override the default in the browser will be inherit, and the font size will also be inherit. All right, now, if we jump back over here to our HTML, you'll see that we've got 2 labels here, and we don't have any classes or anything like that on it. We do have these 4 attributes, so rather than adding extra stuff like a class, let's just use these directly in our CSS. You can reference attributes by adding square brackets like this, and then just adding the attribute inside. So for the title, and then let's also do for the note itself, which I think was the same thing, just with note. And we want a display flex, and we'll do align items center, and we'll turn on flex wrap. And then we'll do a padding of 1 rem to give it a little space inside. And then we'll add a grid gap of 1 rem and a background color. And again, we're going to use that little SCSS hack or trick where we add the light variable and then add a alpha channel to it directly there. We want this to be a little bit bolder, so let's do our font weight of bold. And then we could do something separate. Now that those are both sharing that, we'll want the title to be a little bit different than the actual note. So let's come in here and just now grab the title. And we want to grab only the input that's wrapped inside that title label. And we're going to say, for this, we want flex of 1, 1, and 80%. Now, what this is saying is that we want it to fill up 80% of the container as long as it can and still fit. And then after that, it'll wrap down below. Say border of 3 pixels solid, and we want our light variable. We'll do a padding of 0.5 rem. Our color of the text will be dark. And then again, we want the width to be 100% of its parent container. And now when we focus on this, in other words, when we are selected inside of it, we want the outline to be 2 pixels solid and dark. Now we're going to copy all this down because we want to also do some special stuff just to the note input itself. This would not be an input, but a text area. We're going to keep all of this the same. So maybe let's do this rather than repeat all this multiple times. What if we come in here? Not sure why I did it this way to start with. So we'll come in here and say input and the text area and say that they should both be like that inside either of those. So I guess we don't need to grab them separately. That'll cut down on some of the code we're writing. If we save it and come over here, let's just double check that's working. Excellent. And as we shrink this, let's see, I might need to actually inspect it. Let's make it smaller. You see it wraps eventually. And then when it can fit 80% of it, it does. And this is what this flex grow, flex shrink, and then the 80%. Okay, cool. So let's shut that down, and we saved ourselves a little bit of extra code writing. Now we do have in here not only these labels, but we actually should have a button, which in spite of the last video being short, I've just realized I did not add in here. So we'll come down here, and it's easy enough. We should have an input, and the type will be submit. Sorry for that oversight from last time. So this time we'll grab just the attribute of type submit. We'll say the background color should be our success. And then we'll do a box shadow like we did above. And we'll do 3 pixels, 5 pixels, 8 pixels, and 2 pixels. And we'll do an RGBA of success. And then width to just 20% opacity. Maybe let's do this. Since we know we're going to be using this a lot, let's come up here and add another variable. And we'll say this is going to be our box shadow. And we'll just say box S. All right, and that will be equal to this, and then we'll add the color on for each of them separately. So let's see if I can remember to do that as we move through here. So we can come in here, and we should be able to say box shadow. All right, there we go. Now when we hover or focus on the button, we want there to be a border that shows up, but so that the page doesn't kind of jump up and down as the border comes on and leaves, let's go ahead and add a border up here. We'll do 3 pixels solid, but this time we're just going to do transparent so that it's there, but it's not visible. And that way the page won't jump around when we hover over it. We'll say font size of 1.3 rem. Our color for the text will be white. Padding of 0.5 rem. And we'll do a cursor of pointer. Now we want to transition on this. We'll do all like 250 milliseconds and ease in and out. If I save this, this should all show up, and it's not. All right, I think maybe, let's see, this needs to go down one level. There we go. Okay, I just had wrapped it up a little too high. Now when we hover again, we want it to do a few things. So let's come in here and we'll grab actually both the hover and the focus state. And here we'll say we want an outline of none, which you shouldn't do unless you're going to do something very obvious when they select it or with the tab. So that's what we're going to do. We'll do a box shadow of none. We want to remove that. And we'll do a border of 3 pixels, solid, RGBA. We'll use our dark variable and set it to 50% opacity. So we basically switched out the outline for a border, more or less the same thing. All right, there we go. Okay, so that is mostly done. I think we'll actually jump down and now just work on the note container itself. Now, right now we don't have anything in that note container. You might remember it's just an empty div, but eventually we're going to add notes in here with JavaScript. So let's go ahead and add some, and I've just copied over this. We'll add like, I don't know, 3, something like that. Okay, and you'll see that it shows up over here when I hit save, but nothing is styled because that's what we're doing now. So the first thing we'll do is set a max width so it can't get any larger. Then we'll do 1000 pixels. We'll do a margin of 2 rem, that's up and down, auto left and right, and 1 rem at the bottom. So I guess the first was just up now that I think about it. We'll do a display grid. We'll do grid template columns. And I don't know, I prefer grid when I am able to use it. We'll do auto fit, min max 300 pixels. That's the smallest that can be, up to 1 fraction. And that'll fill out as needed and shrink to 300, but no smaller than that when needed. Maybe let's do a little bit smaller just for mobile devices. Let's do like, I don't know, 280, something like that. I think that should work. And you see when I save, they actually pull up here like this, which is cool. To give a little space between those, let's do a grid gap of 1.5 rem. And now let's look at the HTML to kind of see what we're working with. So we've got, each of these are going to have a class of note. Then they'll have a note title, a note body, note buttons, and then each of these buttons will have a shared class and then a special class to apply their colors and stuff like that. So let's come in here, and I've got this little keyboard or clipboard manager, and it'll allow me to just sequentially paste these. So let's not waste time, and I'll come in here and grab each of these individually. Then let's jump back over here to our style sheet, and let's just paste those in sequentially as we grabbed them. All right, so I've got all those in there. Now let's add the actual content. So we'll say we want a border of 3 pixels, solid, RGBA, and we'll use primary, 0.2 to give us just 20% opacity, padding of 1.5 rem, and transition of, let's do like 250 milliseconds like we did up above. Ease in and out. And I guess we need to actually say we want it to go on everything. Now, as I save, you'll see that those borders come in and everything over this way. Now, I did realize something. If we're gonna, let's go ahead and just remove this max width. And that way, when we save it here, it'll kind of auto snap. In order for that max width to work, we'd probably have to wrap this whole thing in another wrapper and then set that to 1,000 pixels. And this will allow us to kind of snap those down without all that here on mobile. Okay, let's come in here and now grab our note title. And we'll say we want the font size to be 2 rem. And we'll say the margin bottom should be 0.5 rem. And the body. Now here we want to do a few things to the body. Anything over 4 lines, we're just going to truncate. And so the easiest way to do that will be to set an overflow of hidden, and then we'll set a max height. So something like 8 rem. Next, we'll add web kit box orient, and we want to orient vertical. And then for our display, we'll want a web kit box, and we'll set the text overflow to ellipsis. And finally, we're going to add a WebKit clamp on here. So we'll say WebKit line clamp. This clamps it to only 4 lines. And now as we save it, you'll see that anything over 4 lines just gets truncated. And that's how we can use this view detail button here to view the note in our modal that will pop up in a little bit. Now let's come down here to these buttons themselves. For the buttons, we want to display grid. We'll do grid template columns here. And we are just going to want to set this to auto, which will tell it, hey, put these side by side next to each other. Let's do a grid gap 0.5 rem. And now no matter what the button is, we want to do a few things. We'll say, first of all, that the font family should be inherit. And again, that the font size should be inherit. And this overrides those default settings for Chrome here. Next, we'll say the padding should be 0.5 rem and 1 rem. And the margin top should be 1 rem. Color of the text here, we want to be white, and we want the cursor to be a pointer. We're going to set the transition again, and let's stop typing the same thing multiple times. Let me grab this and add it to a variable, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, so all I did was use this transition variable up here, and I'm going to jump down this way, and now that I saved it, I'm getting an error because I haven't added it down below. So we'll add this transition down here, and now they all share the same thing. Whenever we focus or whenever we hover, we want the box shadow that we're going to add on the individual children here to be none. Okay, next let's just look at this view note, the note view, that's this view detail button over this direction. And we want to set the background color here to our primary variable, which is that blue. If I save, you'll see it show up there. And we'll say the box shadow should be our variable, which is, I think, box S. Yeah. And then we added our color in here, and we'll do primary 0.2. You see that shows up nicely for us. And then let's copy this down here, paste this in. And for this primary variable, for the delete, we're going to want to change this to danger. I just did Command D there once I selected one. And as many times as you click Command D, it will grab the next one in your CSS. Okay, now we are almost done. The last thing we have to do is we want to show that modal container here. Now, right now, there's nothing in it, so let's go ahead and add some stuff up top here. This modal container will have a title here, and then we will want some kind of body. Let's do like lorem 31. Come back over here to our style. We roll up here, and you'll see it's up top here. Let's see, let's add this to the top. We'll do a modal container. And the first thing we're going to do is position fix it. So we're going to pull it kind of completely out of the whole page itself. Now let's go ahead and add a background color. And again, we're going to use that RGBA trick here with SCSS to make it a little faster. And we'll just say dark like 0.2, something like that. Let's go ahead and do left 0 and top 0 and bottom 0, and we'll do right 0 just for kicks. Now everything inside this modal container we want to be in the very center of the screen. So the easiest way to do that is to do display grid and then to do just place items center. And that should move all of that to the middle of the screen for us. Now we'll jump back up here in a moment and add some extra stuff so we can show and hide it as we remove a class. But for now, let's go ahead and grab the actual modal itself. And we'll do a max width of 700 pixels and a max height of like 80 view height, something like that. Now we're going to set our overflow to auto so that I can scroll if need be, like on a mobile device or on a, with a node that has a ton of text in it. We'll do a background color here of white, and we'll do a border of 3 pixels, solid and dark. Let's add a little bit of padding to give us a little more breathing room here. And then we're going to do a position of relative because we're going to use absolute positioning on this button. We'll come in here and we're going to grab the modal title, do a font size of 2 rem. We'll do a line height of 1.2, and then a margin bottom of 1 rem, and a max width of 85%. Now we're going to do 85% because we're going to put the little X over this way, and hopefully that'll help most cases where it's not going to overflow over the top of that title. Next, let's grab the modal button. We're not going to do too much to the body of the actual text here because it's fine, all right? But we'll come in here, and for the modal button, we will say position of absolute. And then we're going to do top 1 rem to keep it 1 rem off the top, and right of 1 rem. Maybe let's do like, instead of 1, let's do 0.5, something like that. Give it a little less breathing room up top there, and as I save it, you'll see it pops up over this way. Next, because we added it just kind of as text, we can actually change the color of that with just the color property. We'll do font size of 2 rem and a line height of 2 rem. And let's actually set a fixed width and height for this. So we'll do a height of 40 and a width of 40. And again, we're going to do a cursor of pointer and a border of 3 pixels, solid and dark. Now we want it to be a full circle, so we can do border radius of 50%. And then background color, again, of white for the actual button itself. Now let's do a box shadow to make it look like a lot of our other elements. And again, we're going to use our box S. And in here, we're going to do RGBA, dark, 0.2. And our transition, we'll grab our transition variable. And as we save, you see it kind of starts to take shape. Now, when we hover over it, we want it to actually remove that box shadow. So we'll come in here and say on the hover or on the focus, we want to set the outline to none and the border to 3 pixels, solid, light. We're going to change the color to light as well, so it'll change the color of that X, and then set the box shadow to none. Okay, now we're almost done. You'll see if we come in here and hover over this, we get this little effect. Obviously right now we can't close anything because we haven't hooked up the JavaScript. Now in order to toggle it on and off, we're going to want to add a class to the entire modal container itself. So we'll come in here and we're going to add a class called active. And there's a couple different ways you can do this. If we want to actually just hide it quickly on and off, we can just do display none and then like display block, but that's kind of a sharp, kind of sudden thing. So let's come in here instead and set the opacity of this to 0. Now if I do that at first, I can't actually hover or click on any of these because even though it's not visible, it's still there. So I can say, let's do pointer events of none. And then we're going to come in here and I guess let's add a transition too, so that again, it's not so sudden. So we'll grab our transition variable, and then down here, all we have to do is copy this stuff down, add it down here, change this to 1 and change this to all. And now as we move that on and off, let's go ahead and open up the inspector here, and we're going to add active here. You see it comes on slowly, and we remove this and it removes slowly, which is cool. That's what we want. Okay, so we've got all the CSS done here, and these notes will just stack up one after the other, as many as can fit, and then they'll start wrapping down below for us. We've got this little alert box ready to go that's going to be inserted right here with JavaScript. It's fun to see this project starting to take some shape. And next time we get to do the fun stuff, which is the JavaScript, and again, there'll be a card and a note in the description if it's already up, and you can jump right into that and see how we hook all this up with JavaScript. All right, thanks so much for watching, and happy coding.